whenever you're ready.
Okay, this is Rick Golden, attorney for the board. And I'll just start it off by saying that at the present time, the board is without a chairperson. And what state law provides is that until a chairperson is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Board of Trustees, that it is up to the planning board themselves to choose per meeting basis a chairperson simply to act in that role of sort of moderating things. In between the meetings, it's really been Alana who has put together the agenda, which is usually also a duty of the chairperson. But what I think I need right now is someone to either volunteer themselves or volunteer someone else. And then the board needs to vote on who's going to be a chairperson for the evening. And whoever it is, if you need help during the meeting on chairperson duties, I'll be happy to chime in.
I nominate Noel.
I can't vote, but I also vote yes.
I was going to nominate you, Dennis. Rick, I'll need a lot of guidance, but.
No,
Okay.
you're good. And as I told Alana, I've done it a couple of times, but with her help. So maybe it's a good idea if a couple of us all know how to do it.
Okay, so I need a second for the motion to have Noel be chairperson for this evening.
Second.
But didn't you make the motion?
Yes.
All right, we need somebody else to second it.
Okay.
Jody, I think that's you. I think there's only 3 of us.
John could technically second too.
I second, sorry. I was muted, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I second.
All right, so if we could have a roll call vote so it's clear for the record. Dennis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, Cody, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, and Noel, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a new chairperson for this evening's meeting. So Noel, if you want to now go to the agenda and start us off on the first listed item.
Great. So the first item on the agenda is, I believe we open up for public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Hearing none, I say we move to the first item under the application review, which would be the change of use for PB 2004. Is there any comments from the board on terms of what the change of use?
It may be helpful that if we have an applicant who's representing that to simply summarize what their application is about, and then the board may be able to ask more informed questions.
And he's here. I see Frank is here.
Hi, Frank.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. If you could summarize what your change of use application entails, that'd be great. We'd love to get a sense of what you're doing.
So it's basically a retail store with some small soup salad sandwiches, and there are going to be products on the wall that are jarred. So they have a shelf life of about 18 months. And besides that, it's going to be probably open from about 10 a.m. to, I'm guessing, 8 p.m. And that's it. Basically a small sandwich shop with some pickling stuff on the walls. It's a small shop. It's about 800 square feet. It used to be a record store. I was told if I wasn't doing like soup salad sandwiches, I could leave it as a retail, but I'd like to kind of move forward and, open it up a little bit. So I spoke to the landlord and I got his permission. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Out of curiosity, is there a theme to it? It's just soup salad sandwiches of all types?
Well, I'm a chef. I've been doing like hot sauce and jams and all kinds of pickling things like kimchi, sauerkraut, relishes, as well as cucumbers. So yeah, I've been getting a lot of good feedback within the last years, and I've had a catering company for the last 10 years, and I finally filed for a tax ID to move forward with the catering as well as the brick and mortar. So the brick and mortar is basically going to be the storefront for my name and my business.
Great. So Rick, now I'm what would next steps be in terms of this? Because I know it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I have not reviewed this because this is one that's no attorney review. So typically what would happen is that you'd ask for board comments on it. Anybody, I don't know if you have plans before you that you're looking at or not. But eventually, if you are after asking any questions, you would go ahead and address seeker is one of the things you need to do. And this is a type 2 action under seeker. So you would simply note that for the record. And once that's determined that it is, and our office has reviewed the project and believes that it's a type 2 action, there's no further seeker review that needs to be done. It's also exempt from referral to Ulster County Planning Board. And therefore that should be noted for the record. But after determining what other people may say, the next step really would be to schedule a public hearing.
Great.
Which, just to clarify, in that first email I sent you guys, I made a note of putting the dates for what the public hearing could be, so you can just refer to that when you get to that point.
Is there anyone that has questions, comments from the board?
No,
I just want. It's John. I just wanted to double check. There is a site plan that came along with the application, correct? Showing whatever changes are being made to the layout and the interior of the store.
Yes, I have a project manager on it. It's a really small speed, so there's going to be a type 2 hood put in. It's a small amount of refrigeration and just shelving. So
My only question would be, I guess, to make sure that we don't jump ahead and cost you time is, and I'm wondering whether
John, I don't think we can hear you. Is anyone else having issues?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't hear him.
just the last piece.
John, you want to try saying that again? Okay.
Frank, when you said there was a plan, was that a plan that was submitted to the planning board?
Yes, it was submitted.
Is that in the
Yeah, it's
Google Drive somewhere?
Yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
just scroll down the application. It's scanned in there with the application. It's
chance to
Page
review the
page
hood
15.
plan?
Yeah, and then there's a floor plan.
And I'm kind of throw that to you, Rick.
John, one moment. You're cutting in and out, and Cody just had a quick question. One moment.
I was just wondering if the file was in the thing, but I found it. So
Okay.
I'm looking at it now.
John, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, maybe I'd throw it back to you, Rick, which is, I don't know the circumstances here. I don't know if Corey's looked at this. And I don't know if we, need to not schedule or schedule out the public meeting as opposed to just making sure that Corey and the applicant get together to make sure that there isn't going to be some unpleasant surprise for the applicant. That's all.
Frank, have you met with Corey on this? I assume that you have.
Yes, I spoke with him. I actually spoke with Bill, the building inspector, and they made it quite clear to me what I was able to do and able not to do, and that's the reason why I'm heading in the certain direction that I'm heading in with the business I have set planned.
Oh, okay. That was my only concern, really.
Yes.
Now, the one thing that usually what happens when it's not an attorney review, I don't draft a resolution. So someone needs to be charged eventually, I mean, not tonight, but somebody needs to be charged eventually with actually drafting the resolution and any conditions that there ought to be.
I do have a template for the resolution when the planning board chair does it, and it really is just a matter of like I can even edit it to highlight the portions that need to be edited. So whoever does draft it, we can just have a quick call and I can just explain to you how to do it. That's not a big deal.
Sounds good.
Okay, so hearing no other comments, we need to set a date for the public hearing and also acknowledge the fact that it's technically a type 2 under seeker. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. Right now, there's 2 times that it could be set for the public hearing. Frank, it depends on when you're able to get the like the signs, be able to post and mail signs. If you're able to get those done by July 11th, then we could set a public hearing for July 24th, or we can set it for August 1st. It depends on what's ideal for you.
Whatever's more convenient.
It really doesn't matter to us. If you feel like you can get the signs out and posted by the 11th, then we can set it for the 21st.
What signs? Are you talking about the signs that would be outside of the establishment that would have my logo on it?
No, forgive me. This would be how do you describe these signs again? I forget. That's notifying the community.
The notifications of the public hearing, that there has to be certain notices published. Some of those, the notice is published by, Lana takes care of that. But there are also, as I understand it, signs that have to be put out. And you'd need to work with the building department and Alana and just ask them, what do I need to do? And they'll tell you what you need to do, how do you get the signs, where to post them. And the real question I think that Noel is asking is, can you get all that done in 4 days? Because if you can't, then we've scheduled a meeting that can't occur. So it's going to slow down the process. So if you want more than 4 days, then it may make sense to, what's the deadline for the August 1st meeting?
I don't know the exact deadline, but he would certainly have probably a couple of weeks because there just needs to be 10 days. The signs need to have been mailed out and posted within 10 days of the public hearing.
Okay.
So if you do the first meeting in August, you'll definitely have a comfortable window in which to do that. If you decide that you want to have the public hearing at the second July meeting, you would have significantly less time to get them mailed out and get it posted within that 10-day time frame. So it's kind of up to you if you want to rush yourself and do that.
Frank, unless there's a pressing need to have a difference of a week or two in the operation, I suggest that you take the August 1st date. That will give you enough time so that you can get everything done, make sure the notices get mailed out and the signs put up. Because if you miss the deadline for the 11th, that means that you may not make it for the first anyway. So I think it's better for you to do it in that fashion.
That sounds great. Sure.
August 4th is the first meeting in August. So that's when the public hearing would be. So Noah, when you set the public hearing, it's August 4th at 7 p.m.
Okay.
So what would be in order now is for someone to make the motion to have it on August 4th for the public hearing, and then a second and a vote.
So motion.
Second. And then all in favor, right?
Aye.
Yeah, but on these virtual meetings, since some people don't have a video to chime in, it's
Roll
usually
call.
very good to have a roll call and people say who they are for their vote.
Got it. So Noel McEntee, aye.
Cody Schatzel, aye.
John Oleski, aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
Okay. Wasn't pressuring you either way. Just wanted to make sure you're there. Great. So the public hearing has been set for August 4th. As Rick mentioned, please work with Alana and the village to get those signs both mailed and posted. Am I
Sure.
good? Do I? Okay,
Perfect.
great. Frank, you're welcome to stay and watch. There's not going to be any more birds, but you don't necessarily need to continue on the call if you don't want to.
That was very interesting. I mean, it's nice to learn about birds. House finches are one of my favorites, so I appreciate that.
Great. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'll stick around for a minute. Thank you.
So moving on to PB 20, but there's no number yet since it's not a full application. It's technically 85 North. Oh, did I skip to the wrong thing?
No, that's right.
Okay.
That seems right to me.
Yep, 85 North Chestnut Street. This is not necessarily a it's a pre-application. So we don't need to do seeker or anything like that. But I want to open it up and see if anyone's here from that application.
Yes,
Application.
I'm here. Andy Willingham here, and Rodney Serta, the owner, is also here.
Okay, and if I just might, even though again, this is not for attorney review, but to assist Noel, really what we're asking for here in a pre-application is you sort of go ahead and just discuss the concept and you get some general feedback from the board, but the consultants have not reviewed it at all. And the planning board members may give their initial feedback, but they certainly reserve all their rights to go ahead and change that when they look at it in more detail and get information from any consultants that might be brought on with respect to this.
Yeah, so the reason why we're here is basically to describe the project to the board and kind of get, just as Rick said, get some initial feedback, because the next steps would be to do a fair amount of work as far as building design and landscaping, all kinds of stuff. So we're looking for kind of big picture comments from the board on layout, and hoping to get a code review from Corey as well. So I just kind of go through the project. We were in front of this board 2 years ago to get a change of use to Roddy's Auto Shop, which we got in 2018, the existing building. Property is 0.6 acres at the corner of Mulberry and 32. The plan is to do essentially kind of a much smaller version of Net Zero as far as kind of the layout and the density. The plan is to knock down the existing building, which is an old block building, and put up a 3-story, not 4-story like Net Zero, but 3-story building right up against the sidewalk, which would be a new sidewalk. Also do street parking, same way Net Zero did. Put the parking in the back, kind of screen it, and then do a shared access with the neighboring property, which I understand there's plans to do with light there. This was in coordination with stewards. The plan for the building is it's about 45 by 120 feet. It's going to be half commercial on the bottom floor. We don't know exactly what that is yet. It could be restaurant. We'll have to kind of determine that as we go. Could be restaurant, could be retail, could be office. And then do a couple of units on the bottom floor, which is required by code to do some handicap units. And then do the top 2 stories, all the second and third floor, all 2-bedroom apartments. We envision it right now, just kind of remind the board that this is very kind of square layout. This isn't meant to be interesting yet. This is just, there's a lot of work to do to give it some shape and design. And the early idea is to do something like the Ridge apartment buildings. I don't know if everybody's familiar with those, the off 32. Those are all residential, but they're similar size, similar layout. They don't have commercial on the bottom, so it would be a modification of that, but something of sort of that style. We believe we're meeting all code requirements as far as parking and setbacks, but we are looking for Corey to verify that if possible. And yeah, and again, we're looking for some kind of big picture feedback from the board as far as this, is this something that makes sense in the spot? What needs to change? That kind of thing.
Andy, it's Dennis. Is this pretty similar to what we looked at about a year or so ago?
Did we go into the board with that? With the concept?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, no, because that was we were originally looking at modifying the existing building and going a 2-story, going above.
Okay.
So, but that wasn't that. There was issues with that as far as structure, and the parking would all be in the front, and so we think just a knockdown is the best.
So you're going to knock down this and come and build a complete new structure.
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Noel.
Nope, Dennis, all you.
Well, I look at that all the time. In fact, when I saw it on the agenda, I wanted to make sure of the address, and I think it would be a tremendous improvement, not only to the building, but it's going along with trying to develop that new NBR zone. We had net zero, now we have Stewart's, and now if Roddy and Andy come up with this, it's really starting to take shape, and I'm all for it. Plus, we need more housing.
Yeah.
Hey guys, it's John. Just wanted to throw out there. I agree with everything Dennis said. I think that the whole idea of the NBR was maybe somewhat seemingly unrealistic, that people were going to come along and kind of replace these auto body shops and so forth with mixed use development. And it sounds like this is supposed to be right up the NBR alley. And so my instinct would be exactly the same. But unfortunately, and maybe this is just going to make it impossible for me to continue on the board, but I'm going to have to recuse myself from this one as well. And I'm not going to get into the kind of details, but the reason why is because this corner is kind of the center of one of the 2 historically Black neighborhoods that I have written about, and that was one of the reasons for my recusal. And so I just want to kind of let the board know that, and that's why I unfortunately can't get into, fortunately we're not voting on anything tonight, but it would not be appropriate for me to unfortunately, kind of pass on the big picture issues about this one, given my recusal. And it may be that, it's not going to work out for me to stay on the board if I have to keep recusing myself simply because properties are located in these places. And I understand that. So just want to throw that out there. But definitely, please, good luck with the project, however it can be done. It seems like the kind of project, instinctively, like Dennis says, we need more housing. We need the mixed use. We need the NBR to be a success. So, good luck, and sorry I can't participate in this application anymore.
Thank you, John. That's noted. I would say I agree with everything Dennis said. I also walk by there all the time and always think, I love that there's an auto body shop there and someone's making a living and it's a local business, but I also understand that there's a way to, I like the concept of this. What I will say is, to John's point, I don't know if you've read up on some of the things that Stewart's is currently proposing, but they are working to find ways to address what John is mentioning. So I would say that my recommendation to you would be educate yourself on that, since it is going to be an ongoing conversation. And if there's a way to ensure that it is evaluating and including some of these historical preservation things that John has been bringing up, it's probably, and do this at the same time, it's probably in your best interest to explore that. So that would be my personal feedback as of now.
If I could just chime in from the perspective of the Environmental Policy Board, I think that it's always efficient to let an applicant know what the questions are going to be before you start doing your stuff. So I asked some members of my board if they did have any items they were curious about. And so with regard to the demolition of a building, I'm sure there are rules and procedures and policies that you will follow to make sure that there's no runoff or damage to the rail trail or to the Wallkill. But if you would be so kind, just as a courtesy to, when you put an application in, explains what some of those steps would be for some of the people who aren't in your business, that would maybe avoid some questions down the road. Looking at the comparison with Zero Place, the questions I got from the EPB, and there's no expectation there would be, but they were curious, would there be a rain garden? Would there be a public space? Would there be public restrooms? Would there be access to the rail trail? What sort of approach would there be to energy? Would there be solar and geothermal? So those are some of the questions that, as this process gets to an application and gets to a discussion by the board, those would likely be questions that you might be asked from me on behalf of the EPB. And so I wanted to let you know up front so that you had, it wasn't a surprise, and you had a chance to think about those things. Yeah, that's it. I think it's really cool that the first two projects being developed in the MBR are straddling Maurice Whiteman Way, which was named for the planning board chair who kind of spent the last years of his life putting this MBR plan together. So that's very cool. Good luck.
Well, I appreciate getting all those comments or questions up front. It's helpful.
Simon?
No.
Okay, I think that was Cody saying no.
Yeah, no.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Andy, I'll just ask you, what's your time frame?
I think it's some of that's up to Roddy, but it's going to take probably a couple months to put together a good application, I would say. And as far as construction, I don't know if Roddy wants to chime in when he wants to build.
Would like to build as soon as possible, as soon as we get the, permits or approvals, and want to move ahead as soon as we can.
All right, well, that's good.
So one of my questions, or some of my questions, are on setbacks. And I read, codes aren't always completely obvious on what they say. And I think we meet setbacks, but has Corey done a review? And how do we get him to do a review? I just don't want to do a full design and find out that I have to move everything.
I think the best, this is Rick Golden. I think the best way, Andy, is to talk to Corey and see how much he needs in order for him to go ahead and give you something. He may not need full-blown engineering plans, but he may need some level of detail so that he can actually look at that and make determinations based upon the code. I think it's very difficult and maybe a little unfair to just ask him to give you some determinations based upon a verbal description of the project.
Okay.
But he would be best placed to go ahead and say how much detail he needs in order for him to give you direction that you want.
Is he still doing the code review thing, whatever that one page thing he comes up with? He only does that when you submit a full application.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
So that seemed to be kind of based on the chair's prerogative, whether or not he was doing that. So like Michael Zeeler was kind of into it, and Eve was super into it. So she was very aggressive about making sure he was doing it. So it kind of, at the moment we don't have a chair. I certainly have the template that he could use to do the code review, but I think his hesitation in doing full code reviews is that like technically he should be charging like $150 an hour to be doing those reviews, is what he has said to me. Because they do take up a lot of time. So
Alana, I think that's an excellent point, but and what I want to follow it up with is that just to make sure that I wasn't misunderstood in what I was suggesting. I was not suggesting to get that kind of information from Corey before you file an application. It was, you would file the application and pay the fees. And then whatever detail that Corey needed in order to make that determination on a filed application, that's what you would do. Not that you would do that before filing an application.
And then the idea is that the application fees would cover the cost of us administratively looking at the plans and calling Rick's office and like trying to get you the interpretation of what you're asking for. So it's kind of really a matter of just like paying the fees up front, because there's been a lot of issues where Corey would take a lot of time to review an application before any fees came in. And then when he got back to the applicant to say what the deal was, they were like, oh, never mind. So he had done like hundreds of dollars of work for free, and then it didn't even go before the planning board. So that's just kind of the biggest issue there.
Okay. I mean, I think we're good unless there's any other comments from the board.
None from me. In that case, since there was no action on that, we can just move forward. Correct, Rick? We don't need to motion to do anything.
That's correct.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So moving on to PB 1827, modifications to the approved site plan and resolution for Stewart's Shops on North Chestnut Street. I'm just pulling up my notes. Do we have anyone here for the application?
Yeah, this is Chuck Marshall from Stewart's.
Hi, Chuck. Do you mind just giving us a bit of background in terms of what the modifications are that have been requested?
Yeah, so back in June, I was contacted by Bill Murray about the potential preservation of 5 Broadhead, which is the Oliver Wickup house. Obviously, there's some history involved in the structure, and Stewart's wasn't aware of it before Bill's call. So what we're looking to do, I'm just gonna share my screen here. So this is the proposed Stewart's plan that you guys received modifications for last week. And you can see the stormwater pond is now in this general vicinity. Back in March when the plans were approved, the pond was longer, running east and west. What we've done is we made it kind of shorter and stubbier and moved it all the way to the western side of the site. And this will enable the foundation and potentially the house in its entirety to remain. Stewart's will then enter into either an easement or will deed the property to the village. And then the village can either preserve the house in its entirety or preserve the foundation for the creation of some type of monument or park or some type of historic, historic designation or something befitting of the significance to the village.
Great. And I think if I remember correctly, your letter also requested something in terms of the traffic pattern because you're waiting from the DOT.
Yeah. So again, back the last time I was before the board was in March, and that was right before the world kind of took its major turn. We're dealing with a 5-month lead time on the polls for the traffic improvement. So if we have everything into DOT, and even if DOT said, you're good to go today, those polls wouldn't be delivered till like December or January. And the stipulation in number 3 indicates that we have to wait for the light to be open or operational before the certificate of occupancy can be issued. And I would like that modification to read that we can open without the light, with the understanding that DOT isn't going to let us fully function until the light's installed. So we would like the village to amend that to let us open and then have effectively a year to complete the improvement. Obviously, anticipating it'll take us less time than that. But with the 5-month lead time, we don't want to lose the entire construction season.
Great, thank you for that. I'm looking for, in terms of, I'm just looking for the notes on this, Rick. John, I believe, is recused from this, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Great. So just to make sure I understand, the next steps are the board discussing it and then us deciding whether or not we have the ability to say that we'll make a change to that, like we'll accept that amendment?
Yeah, but there's a couple of other things I think we should discuss. First,
Okay.
Chuck, it's wonderful that you shared your screen, but it also co-ops my screen, so I can't look at my notes or the resolution. There you go. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
We may ask you to put it back up. But,
that's fine.
So there's a couple of things that the board has to consider. So that's Stuart's request is really twofold. They're willing to go ahead and preserve the home or foundation, and that has to have some flexibility because that, as I understand what Chuck was saying, it's not determined yet which route is going to be going, and part of that may be, does it financially or otherwise make sense to actually try to preserve the whole home, which is condemned at this point in time, and it may or maybe not, but that's really not for you to decide. So I'll have to draft something in there flexible enough to allow for all that, and then with an obligation that Stewart's would be setting forth in this resolution, that it would then deed either an easement or deed in fee that area to the village, for the village to then get somebody else to go ahead and take over the responsibilities, and either the village maintain a sort of a park area, or whether or not it would simply be a restored home in which it would then be carried on as a single family home. So there'll be some flexibility in there, but that's part of what he's suggesting. And the other part is, as he explained, is to hold off on the roadway improvements. So this board had the ability, and it exercised it, to say, you can't open until you do these improvements. And part of that was these improvements were in mitigation of anticipating larger traffic volumes in that area. And so, one, you need to feel comfortable that just generally, you need to feel comfortable that that's a good idea to delay it now and allow them to open for the reasons that have been stated. And then the other thing is, not all of you were here when the seeker was done on this, but this was given a negative declaration But I think part of that analysis was that whatever traffic impacts there were more than mitigated by the improvements that were being done. That doesn't mean that if the improvements are delayed, you still can't decide that it's a neg deck, but you need to sort of analyze now as to whether or not, if this is delayed for some period of time, and we may need Chuck to give us a better definition of when, rather than maybe 20 years from now this gets done. But he wants to open up now, do the roadway improvements at a later date. And at that point in time, do you think that there's still going to be impacts that require him not to be opening up, or whether you think that the impacts, although they are increased impacts and adverse impacts, whether they are that significant that it would say that, no, you can't do that. And then the other thing is and this one I'll kind of answer for you unless somebody else has a different answer. And that is that this was referred to the Ulster County Planning Board, and they gave their opinion and thought that those improvements ought to be made. But they couched it basically in the context that they want to see these made, and they want to make sure that the village and the applicant are working with the DOT. Now, that is still happening. What Chuck is suggesting is not to abandon the collaborative effort that's been going on among the village and stewards and the DOT. So I don't think that this needs a re-referral to the Ulster County Planning Board, but it's really up to this board whether you think that that's a good thing to do, is to open it up before you have those improvements, and whether or not you still would consider this to have no significant adverse environmental impacts if the roadway improvements were delayed.
Great, thank you. Anyone from the board have thoughts on that?
Well, Rick, do we vote on that now, or it's just the three of us?
Well, there's the three of you, but you know, there's only one more person potentially that you could get in on this, because John is recused.
Right.
So unless there's another alternate that's appointed, I think you may, three is maybe what you get, maybe you get four. But yes, you can go ahead and act on this now, or maybe you just want to go ahead and discuss it some more and then postpone it to your next meeting to take action. That's entirely within the discretion of the board.
Noel, did you read see the letter from Tom Olson?
I did.
So do you want us to chime in on this, or what would you like us to do?
Well, I mean, first, I think it'd be good to hear, you know, if anyone is, if there's any concerns, and whether or not we should vote now, or if there's something we should do there's a reason we should delay it. I mean, I'd also just love to hear, you know, Dennis, what your thoughts are in terms of the proposal.
Okay, well, I'll start with this. I think Stewart's is a great neighbor. I think they're a very good company. Chuck has done a very thorough job over the years with the planning board. Of course, we've seen throughout businesses, things have changed because of the COVID situation. Chuck is saying that they're not going to not do the traffic light, and I believe him 100%. Also in construction, you do have a lot of time frames that you have to work within. So I see no reason at all not to allow them to go ahead, say that we will give them additional time to get the traffic light going, but don't hold up their CO just because they can't get the poles from the DP, from the highway department. So I'm all in favor of allowing us to make an amendment.
Great. Rick, I think my question to you is that the way it's currently framed, they can't open until this is done, which was the only control we had on this. If we allow this amendment, we then have lose control to ensure that this actually goes through. Is that correct, or am I incorrect?
Well, I mean, if that's all you did, then yes, but you have the ability to substitute a different control. For instance, you could say that that these improvements have to be installed in the next 7 months. And if not, then his approval lapses, which then means that they have to close down. And you would allow them to go ahead and come back to the board to show you good reasons as to why that might be extended further. But I certainly wouldn't suggest, I mean, I would suggest that you wouldn't go ahead and just leave it without any controls whatsoever.
Yeah, that's
if I could just real quick, in my letter, I was, somewhat like acknowledging this and just saying the temporary CO should only last for a period of a year. And then and then we would be obligated to get the improvement installed and operational before a permanent CO could be issued. So we're not by any means looking to get out of the light, but we just want to kind of get going before we lose another season.
okay. Rick, in terms of the next steps here, the two options are either specifying what we as a board want the cutoff to be, or waiting until the next meeting when we may or may not have another alternate to vote. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, I don't know that it necessarily will add all that much to wait simply for an alternate to come on. First of all, you don't know whether or not you're going to get more than 3.
Okay.
But I do think that, it's a significant issue. They're asking for a year of operation with additional traffic and additional pedestrian use without those improvements in place. And the one thing that you need to decide, and I think it may be all right for you to go ahead and take one more meeting to sort of mull it over because it's significant, the decision-making, is whether or not that impact is significant. Now, you all know from common sense, and you're allowed to use your common sense. The law sometimes comes down on the right side and says, yes, common sense can be used by planning board members. You know the area. You know that whether or not a year probably makes sense, that it's not going to, the world isn't going to fall apart if in fact those improvements aren't done. So it may make sense for you to take another 2 weeks to kind of mull that over in everybody's minds before you make a determination. But you do have to make that decision on the seeker analysis before you go ahead and vote on this. And you can it can be just a reaffirmation of your prior seeker negative declaration. But the one thing you have to do for seeker is when there's a change like this, you have to show that you've taken a hard look and you've made your determination based upon that. Now, the one thing, let me ask Chuck this, is we've been talking about these modifications, including the traffic light, as one ball of wax. But is that technically, or from a construction point of view, really the way we need to do it? Or can we get additional improvements in other than the light because of the pole prior to the year?
That's a good point. We can install the road widening and the lanes without doing the light. The poles for the light have a 5-month lead time. And we've had everything into DOT. We expect final approval over the next, hopefully 2 weeks. But obviously they don't move particularly quickly. But it would be the road widening and then the pedestrian improvements and then when the poles are delivered, ultimately the light. Just from a mobilization and construction perspective, we just don't want to start and stop. We kind of want to do everything together because we feel like if you're going to impact the intersection, it's best to impact it once, then impact it, a series of times.
Okay, the board has to take that into consideration, whether or not, and I understand what Chuck is saying is that it does make sense to sort of do it all at one time, but you had to consider that maybe to you, it's a great impact if all of those improvements wait for 1 year versus not such a great impact if the only thing that we're waiting for is a light for 1 year. And that you certainly have the ability to say to the applicant that they need to do some of these improvements, such as the road widening and the pedestrian improvements earlier. And you can set a date. You don't have to make it before the building permit is issued. The certificate of occupancy is issued for the building, but you could make it later. Or you could say, yeah, we're fine with just leaving all the improvements for a year because we think that that's not going to be a significant adverse environmental impact.
And again, from Stuart's perspective, we're willing to commit to the road work without the light. Just the biggest, if the board were to say, okay, Stuart, we're accepting of this, we would obviously still need DOT's approval. But it's just the poles that we're having the problem with. We think that the road work itself can be incorporated into the Stewart site improvement.
So Chuck, what you're suggesting is that you actually would do all the improvements except for the light and associated poles and work that goes along with that. You would do that prior to the opening. Is that correct?
Correct. It would be, from my perspective, it would be just the light that we would be waiting for on the timing. And again, our anticipation is that DOT would restrict the access, because if you think about the approach on Henry Du Bois, and you're adding a lane there, without a signal, you can't add the lane. So DOT would probably cone off one of the approaches to Chestnut from Du Bois, so that it would operate the same way it operates today under kind of a stop sign.
So the condition would probably be something along the line that you will perform all of the road widening and pedestrian improvements, except for the intersection light and poles, et cetera, to the extent that DOT will authorize such work to be done.
Correct.
Okay. I think so the first thing we need to do is if we do allow that, we need to evaluate as a board whether or not this changes the seeker evaluation. Correct? Right. Cody and Dennis, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I remember it being kind of a sticking point, the whole putting up a light thing. It seemed like something we deliberated over for a really long time. I know, like Rick said, this is something that to some degree we're supposed to use our common sense and discretion on. But at the same time, it's like, could I imagine a situation in which the traffic becomes so heavy that it's a real problem? Yes. Could I imagine it not really having, having a significant effect? Yes. I have no idea. So I don't know whether, I guess I have no opinion on it per se. It really is just based on whether we should allow that to move forward is just based on whether wasn't there a traffic study done? Like what does that say?
Yeah, well, I was just trying to look that up because it's been so long that I've forgotten it. Chuck, you may know more. I know you had traffic consultant. Did the planning board also have a traffic consultant?
They did not. So
Okay.
what we had agreed to do was we used Mazer Consulting because they had also done Zero Place. And what happened is that the relocation and the increase in size of the Stewart's tripped the warrant for the light. But if you think about it from the perspective of the Stewart's that's north of the intersection is going to basically close down. Those trips are just going to come to this this location, and they're not really going to generate a new traffic pattern. As a whole, convenience stores are about a 65% pass by trip association, which means that they're non-destination trips and cars already on the roadway.
One suggestion I might have, if
I see.
This may go down to along the lines of what Cody was referring to, was to actually have Stewart's, have Mazer give this a once over for a summary of their opinion to the planning board. The planning board doesn't always need its own consultant. It's allowed to rely upon applicants' consultants. And especially when you're dealing with the engineering fields, there's an aspect to it that you're allowed to rely upon the professionalism of the applicant's consultant as well. So that one of the things that the board may want to do is ask Stewart to go ahead and between now and the next meeting, have Mazer do sort of an analysis. It doesn't have to be a full-blown traffic analysis with counts and everything, but from their professional experience as to what would be the impact of delaying the light for the 1 year. And that may help inform your decision-making. Is that where you're going, Cody?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just asking to see the study or be reminded of it because, to the point he just made, that logically makes sense to me. Like, again, using comic sense, the traffic that's going to the current Stewart's will just go to the new Stewart's. But at the same time, what makes sense to me is the new Stewart's is a better location, a different location, and possibly will have more traffic. So, but me as a layperson using what I think is my common sense is not as good as seeing what experts have deemed to be, reasonable amount of people or whatever.
So if the board would like, what I'll have Mazer do is I'll take the section of the traffic study that deals with the trip generation. I'll take it. I mean, I can obviously provide the whole study to the board again. But the other side is I can have them.
Wouldn't you be able to just send that out to everyone? That should be in the file.
Yeah,
right?
I'm pretty sure it's in the Google Drive, but I can just forward it out again.
So if you want,
I think what the board may need, Chuck, is we're now dealing, I mean, that basically came up and the ultimate conclusion was a light. And so the question is that given that conclusion, at the end of the day, now that a light is going to be postponed for upwards of a year, what your consultant says would be the impact of that.
yeah. So I'll have them do a kind of a one-page letter indicating the impact. I'll also have them reach out to DOT in an attempt to get what DOT would provide for stipulations if they were okay with the roadway widening and the pedestrian improvement being installed without the light.
Okay.
Great. I think that seeing that and being able to review that in more depth, to Cody's point, the common sense doesn't always help us in points where you don't have a lot of knowledge based in it. So I would say I would move to, postpone our decision on this until the next meeting, assuming we can get those details from the applicant.
Fine. That's fine with me. And then simultaneously, Rick can speak with the village about what they want to do as far as conditions for the site plan maintaining or retaining the foundation of the house. You know, to give them the flexibility going forward for what they plan to do.
I can do that.
All right, thanks everyone. I'll try to get something to Alana as soon as Mazer gets it to me.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chuck.
All right, have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
Charles. Thank you.
Great. So
I have no common sense as a human being, so just wouldn't even matter either way.
I highly doubt that, but I agree. I was in the position, regardless, I was going to motion or ask that we move it because I feel like it's too much, it's too big of a impact for us
Right.
to make that decision collectively right now.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Great. So I lost my page. What are we what are we doing next?
Doing
That's
the
it.
minute approvals.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, let me just chime in for a second, Noel. So he has to get the information from the DOT as well as from Mazer.
True. Yep.
He may or may not be able to get that to everybody by the time for the next meeting. So whenever he gets it to Alana, if there's enough time to put it on the next meeting, fine. But if not, it'll have to go to the next meeting because Mazer may be busy and not be able to give that analysis within, a week's time. And DOT may be difficult to get somebody to actually make a decision and say, yes, you can do some, but not all. Sometimes they're afraid to make those types of decisions. So until it gets pushed up the ladder. So that may take a little time.
Great. So Alana, that we'll just wait to see well, this will be then added to a future agenda once we've had time to receive and review those, right?
Mhm.
Great. So now I feel like I don't remember any of the things I'm supposed to say. So the next thing is a motion to approve the minutes for May 19th as well as June 2nd.
So motion.
Second.
Second.
Great. And then there's village board and
Before you go on, Noel,
Oh.
you just need to get a roll call vote on it so that it's for the record who's voted for it.
Great. And those in favor?
Dennis, aye.
Cody, aye.
John, I.
Noel, aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Great. So then we move on to administrative business and other updates.
Yeah, I don't know what those are, so I can't help out with those.
That's all right.
Alana?
That's just if Bill has any comments from the village board, or Don has any comments from from environmental policy.
The Environmental Policy Board did not discuss anything of interest or pertaining to the planning board at our last meeting. I have personal curiosity on where things stand with the zoning change for the entire village that has been the topic of conversation over the last couple of meetings, but I'll just look at the New Paltz Times to catch up on that. So I'm done.
Thank you.
Bill, you have anything?
Yeah, well, we just discussed the more pressing thing, more pertinent thing that we've been working on with regards to the property on Broadhead. It's great that Stewart's has been so generous with this offer, and let's hope that an agreement can be reached between the village and Stewart's. Be a wonderful project.
Bill, do you know who I should be speaking with respect to the preference of the village? Because it's fine to say the village wants the home not raised. so that it can try to preserve it. But if they don't have somebody to preserve it, then I'm not sure that that has moved anything along in a positive way versus, and then the village would have the obligation to tear it down if it couldn't get somebody to restore it. So who do you think I should be speaking with to find out if there's any traction there?
Well, our conversations are, well, there's two tiers. Plan A would be to preserve the building as a home or as a cultural location for recognizing Black Americans and their contributions to New Paltz and to the state of New York. If we can't find an organization to adopt the building in such a way, then, or a private person to, someone who's interested in buying the house and restoring it, then the plan C, I guess, would be to have the building raised. And in my conversations with stewards was that they would pay for the demolition, but retain the footprint, the foundation that the house sits on, so that we could, as a village, would take ownership of that particular property and make that into a memorialized sort of setting, a park, if you will.
So obviously what we're talking about now is Stewart's wants to open within a certain period of time. I'm not sure when they want to open, but the decision on the home has to be made at some point in time.
Right.
As to whether or not you've had a reasonable opportunity to try to get somebody to restore it, or whether or not you're simply going to go to a different plan where you'll have Stewart raise it so that the village doesn't incur that cost. I don't know what Stewart's, and you may know, Bill, I don't know what Stewart's desire is as far as whether or not they want that building in an unrestored condition at the time that they open up, or whether or not they want something done before then.
Yeah, that's a great question. Excuse me. We haven't put a timeline on it, but certainly ahead of the opening of Stewart's, we should have resolvement of it.
Do you know when they plan on opening? If they're given this reprieve from the planning board?
My last conversation with Chuck was by the end of the year. That's the hope and the plan.
Okay. Should I be talking to you about this or the mayor?
You can talk to both of us. We're
Okay.
pretty much, working on it together. Absolutely.
Okay.
If the planning board has any other questions, please do.
I currently don't. Cody and Dennis.
None for me.
No, I think the two proposals I've seen sound fine to me. But certainly I would assume it's something, if they decide not to keep the structure, just the foundation, and make it into a garden or a memorial, that could happen real quick. If somebody decides they want to refurbish the entire building, it'll take quite a bit longer.
That's right. Also on the table too, if somebody's interested in moving the structure, that's also a possibility.
I wouldn't see that. I mean, I think, isn't the location part of the history?
Yeah, the location is the primary driver in this.
Okay.
Great. So it sounds like there's just a few more details there for all of us to understand in terms of what the proposal is from Stewart's and what the current ideas are in terms of preservation of this historical house and location. But as of now, I don't believe there's anything else on the agenda for us to cover. Is that correct? Great.
Right.
So, motion to motion to adjourn.
I second.
Second,
You can do a voice vote on this. All in favor?
aye.
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 Thanks,
John
guys.
says aye.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll talk to you later.
Your turn
Peace.
next.
Bye.
Good chairperson duties.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
job, Kyle.
Yeah,
Great
good,
job.
good job, Noel.
Thanks. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. Alana and Rick, you're crushing it, holding us together.